with new House Speaker Paul Ryan. And the president shifts his strategy in Syria.
My answer is simple. I will not put American boots on the ground in Syria.
The decision that the president has made is to further intensify our support.
We'll discuss the situation in the region with Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the biggest critics of the administration's foreign policy. Then, Paul Ryan takes the gavel from John Boehner.
We need to make some changes, starting with how the House does business.
We speak with the new Speaker of the House on the challenges ahead. And the new shape of the Republican presidential race after this week's controversial debate.
This is not a cage match.
We have ISIS and Al-Qaeda attacking us, and we're talking about fantasy football?
We'll get Carly Fiorina's reaction.
After the last debate, I was told that I didn't smile enough.
And from the undercard stage, former New York Governor George Pataki. Plus, our Sunday panel weighs in on the future of Jeb Bush's campaign.
You should be showing up to work. I mean, literally, the Senate, what is it, like a French work week?
Someone has convinced you that attacking me is going to help you.
All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We begin with a shift in strategy in Syria. The White House announcing it will send around 50 special operations forces there to assist in the fight against ISIS. That contradicts President Obama's earlier vows to not put American boots on the ground. The White House says the troops are not there for combat. Here to discuss the move is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, a member of the Armed Services Committee who has advocated sending more troops to the region to battle the Islamic State. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Let's start there. You've been saying for months that we're going to need troops on the ground there to battle ISIS. What do you think of the president sending in these 50 Special Forces operators?
It will not change conditions on the ground. Here's what I've said. I intend to destroy ISIL. They want three things. They want to purify the Islamic faith and take it back to the 1100s. They want to destroy the state of Israel and attack infidels like us. Al-Baghdadi said to the American colonel who turned him over to the Iraqis after he was in an American POW camp in Iraq, "I'll see you in New York." President Obama said he will degrade and destroy ISIL. Sending 50 American Special Forces into Syria in the eyes of ISIL shows that Obama is not all in. It is a sign of weakness to ISIL. They've sized Obama up and they think he's weak. And to our allies, sending 50 troops means that we're not committed to destroying ISIL. And if we're not committed to destroying ISIL, they will attack us here. So this is a failure on all fronts. These 50 American special operators are going to go into a very bad spot with no chance of winning. And at the end of the day, this will not destroy ISIL. This is an incremental change. It has no chance of success.
As we said at the top of this, the president was adamant 2 years ago that he was not going to put American forces into this fight. Let's just roll the clock back and look at what he said.
I will not put American boots on the ground in Syria. I will not pursue an open-ended action like Iraq or Afghanistan.
Is that a lesson in don't take any option off the table?
Yes, sir, it is. My goal is to destroy ISIL because if we don't hit them over there, they're going to hit us here. And here's what the president has done, basically. He has surrendered on two fronts. His goal of degrading and destroying ISIL, this strategy will not work. At the end of the day, Barack Obama is turned out to be a completely incompetent commander-in-chief. He doesn't listen to sound military advice. Leaving Iraq too soon led to the rise of ISIL, and John Kerry, as Secretary of State, is a completely delusional man. What we're about to accomplish is to turn Syria over to Russia and Iran, and to make sure that we never destroy ISIL on Obama's watch and pass this mess on to the next president.
Senator, one of the big concerns is that we're now going to have American forces and Russian forces operating in the same area with competing agendas. Right. Do you see the potential here for direct confrontation, either accidental or intentional?
Well, there may be some potential, but I see Russia and Iran mopping the floor with Obama and Kerry. Russia is all in with Iran to support Assad. President Obama said Assad must go. The Russians say, no, he will stay. They're fighting to keep Assad in power. Assad is a puppet of the Iranians. His regime is not going to be accepted by the Syrian people because he slaughtered 250,000 of them. It will destabilize the region, and now Obama's allowed Russia to dismember Syria like he did Ukraine, and the Russians are now back in the Mideast, strong, they've never been stronger since 1973. This is a complete disaster for us. It means the war never ends. The refugees continue to flow, and ISIL has a recruiting opportunity now. Come to Syria and fight our mortal enemy, the Shia Persian Iranians. This is screwed up at every level. Assad is winning. We're losing. ISIL is getting stronger. The 50 going in on the ground are in harm's way without any chance of success. I cannot tell you how bad this is. And here's what John Kerry will do. He will cut a deal with the Russians and the Iranians where they get control over Syria. The Iranians will have yet another Arab capital under their control, and he will declare victory. Since this deal with Iran, the nuclear deal, Iranians have test-fired a missile in violation of UN sanctions. They have put troops on the ground in Iran to hurt our interest, and they have now jailed the 4th American business person. Is this the change we were hoping for?
Hey,
Iran is just slapping Obama and Kerry in the face.
Senator, we just got about 30 seconds left, but I did want to talk to you about the debate, because there's a big meeting in Northern Virginia tonight. Your campaign is participating, talking about changes in debates going forward after the debacle on Wednesday. Very quickly, if you could, what changes do you want to see?
I want smaller groups on the stage, better questions, and let us all be heard from equally. Reince Priebus is a good man. He's rebuilt the Republican Party that was pretty much in tatters, but this debate structure is not leading to the best candidate coming out of the debates. I would like to have smaller groups, all of us be heard equally, ask better questions. If we'll do that, we'll get the best nominee to win an election we can't afford to lose. If we continue with this process, I think it's going to hurt our chances of winning in 2016.
Senator Graham, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Sorry you didn't get the extra hour to sleep in today, but I hope you'll enjoy the football game.
I will. Thank you very much for having me.
Now to the shakeup in Congress, as Congressman Paul Ryan, the party's former vice presidential nominee, takes the top job in the House of Representatives and is vowing to change the way Congress does business. Earlier, I sat down with the newly elected House Speaker to discuss his plans to unify the Republican Party. Mr. Speaker, good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time. You said that you wanted party unity prior to taking over Speaker and in your inaugural address. For the moment, for the most part, you've got it. What do you do to keep the party together? How do you get the two sides of the GOP together so you can actually get things done?
I think we've been bold on tactics, but not on policy. And I think we've been too timid around here for too long. And I think the key is to offer the country a very bold alternative, a very bold agenda for how we can solve this country's problems. And I think that is how we unify.
How much rope do you give the Freedom Caucus? Because already a lot of members are taking a lot of heat from constituents just for supporting you.
Look, I think the key here is we need to get Congress working like it was intended to by the founders, a bottom-up consensus-driven process. That's number one. Number two, I think it's very important that we are a successful opposition party. If we don't like the direction the country's headed, not only do we use the tools that we have to be a successful opposition party, but we have to be, number three, a proposition party. This is where we have fallen down, and I think this is what unifies Republicans, which is to show the country how we would do things differently. How do you overhaul the tax code? What does a replacement of Obamacare look like? How do you effectively attack the root causes of poverty to help people build their lives? How do you get economic growth? Those are the things that people are hungry for, and that is what I think we need to offer the country, because we don't think the country's headed in the right direction. We ought to show what we would do if we had the ability to do it, and that's what I think unifies us.
Now, in terms of doing things differently, your last vote before you became Speaker was you voted for the budget deal after saying long and loud, this whole thing stinks.
It did. I think the process stunk. Well, so here's what happened.
But I've talked to several Republicans who say if you can say that about the budget deal, if you can really be opposed to the whole thing and yet vote for it, that under your speakership it's going to be business as usual. What do you say?
My colleagues who know that I think differently. We were coming up to a deadline on Tuesday where we could have had a potential default. We were coming up with a deadline on appropriations in December the 11th. And what happened was leadership presented us with a bill a few days beforehand. We should not be doing business that way, and I've been the first among many to discuss that. So what I think we need to do as a Republican conference is develop a strategy early on, involve all members of our conference so that we can think about these issues ahead of time and not get right up to the deadlines, so that we can prosecute a strategy early on and show people who we are, open the process up. That is how we have to do things differently. Look, I told the members of our conference, I cannot pick up where John Boehner left off. I can't do things the same way. We have to do things differently. I think most members agreed with that, and I think that's one of the reasons why my colleagues asked me to do the job.
And the people I talk to agree with you that the process has to change, but they also think that if you're coming up against these hard deadlines, you should use them as leverage to get the things that you really want, as opposed to just going along with the status
We should have
quo.
been meeting months ago to discuss how we would have done that. We didn't do that.
3 Republican presidential candidates in the Senate voted against this bill. The Democrats say that's reckless. They're playing fast and loose with the future of the American economy, and they don't deserve to be elevated to the presidency because of that type of behavior. Were their votes reckless?
Look, I'm not going to criticize how a person voted one way or the other. What I think we need to do is change the way we do business. I think we've been bold on tactics, but not bold on policy. I think we owe the country an alternative. And that is why I think in 2016, we need to show people who we are, what we believe, and how we would do things differently, and what our ideas and policies are to change the direction of this country, because we think the country's headed in the wrong direction. We think the president's leading us in the wrong direction. And here in the House, we have to all offer a bold alternative, and that's exactly what unifies us and what we're going to work on.
So that's your vision. And I talked to other Republicans who say going forward in terms of changing up the status quo and what you should be doing as a party is, in this presidential year, you should be putting on the president's desk legislation on regulatory reform, spending bills that puts the Democrats in a difficult place. Would you agree that that's a proper
I'm not
strategy?
talking about putting anybody in a difficult place. I think we ought to have to give the country solutions.
But this is what the party wants.
The party wants to be on offense. The party wants to give people alternatives. We are elected by our constituents to represent them. And people in this country are very anxious and very frustrated about the direction of this country. You know, working people of America are falling behind. They're not getting ahead. They're very worried about their future. Foreign policy is an absolute disaster. So we owe the people of this country a different vision for how we will go forward. And this is what we owe our constituents, and this is what we're going to do.
But, you know, you've got to also keep the party together. And there are many conservatives who say, we did well in the polls in the election in 2014 after the government was shut down in 2013. There's a new AP poll out there that shows a divided public. Says, okay, if you want to shut down the government in order to force the president to swallow this difficult choice of spending cuts or inflating and blowing out the budget, you're probably right to do that. Do you not have, has history recently at least, not shown that you can do whatever you need to do to rein in big government?
Look, I think your gaze is too low. You have to raise your gaze to the horizon, which is we have to show people.
But this isn't
where
my
we're
gaze.
No,
this is the gaze of
the
people
premise
who are
of
in
your
your
question is
party.
what I'm talking about, which is we have not shown, we've been too timid on policy. We've been too timid on vision. We have none. And so this is what I think we can unify over, which is so people understand why we make decisions on a day-to-day basis. They don't understand where we're going. We have to show people where we're going and what horizon we're shooting for, meaning what are our ideas, how do we take the founding principles and reapply them to the problems of the day to give real solutions for working families so that they can get ahead, so that they can see that we can get this American idea back. That's the problem. We fight over tactics because we don't have a vision. We have to have a vision and offer an alternative to this country so that they can see that if we get the chance to lead, if we get the presidency, and if we keep Congress, this is what it will look like. This is how we'll fix the problems that working families are facing. That is what we have not done. That's what we need to do. And that is, in my opinion, how we unify.
In order to do that, some mainstream Republicans have told me, you, as Speaker, may have to start throwing the Senate under the bus to get what you want.
No, I don't think
I
don't think we throw any Republicans under the bus. I think, look, I was not asked to disunify the Republican Party in the Congress. I was asked to unify. So throwing Republicans under the bus is not in my job description. We have to unify, and we have to also understand the limits that the Constitution places on us when we have a president that doesn't agree with us, when we have a president that's unwilling to listen to us. So hold truth to power, be an effective opposition party, but be a very effective proposition party.
In the lead up to taking over as Speaker, you promised a new spirit of openness, a new spirit of transparency.
Absolutely.
Will you, as Speaker, make public the full text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Yeah, it's in the law.
No, but it's secret right now.
It hasn't. We haven't even seen it yet. They haven't finished drafting it yet.
But when you get it, will you make it public?
The Trade Promotion Authority legislation, which I co-authored, requires that this trade agreement be made public to all of Americans so that they can see it.
How soon will that happen?
That's up to the administration. They're drafting it right now. That's not something that's within our control. We don't draft this trade agreement. That was negotiated. When that text comes to Congress, it has to be made public for at least 60 days. It will be made public much longer than that. So John, just to answer your question, the law that we wrote requires that the country get to read every piece of this agreement.
In terms of the vote, it looks like the vote's going to happen in the lame duck session of Congress next
I don't know when the vote's going to happen.
Will you make the vote earlier so that so the Republican voters can get an idea of where your members stand on this?
We haven't even seen this trade agreement yet, so I don't know when.
Would you be open to that?
Occurred. I'd be open to anything. I don't know when the vote's going to occur. Because just so you know, we haven't been sent this agreement yet.
No, I understand that. Right. You said that you will not pass any immigration bill that is not approved by the majority, the so-called Hastert rule. Will you faithfully adhere to the Hastert rule on other legislation? Or will you, like Speaker Boehner, cobble together a coalition of Republicans and Democrats in order to get past the Freedom Caucus?
Let me answer it this way. I was elected to unify the Republican conference, not to disunify the Republican conference. And so I think on the big controversial issues of the day, I want to reach for not just a narrow majority. I want to get us to consensus. And that, I think, is what a good leader does, which is bring us to consensus.
So will you?
So just to answer your question, I wasn't made dictator of the House. I was made Speaker of the House. And that means I want to facilitate and lead us to consensus. There are always exceptions to the rules, and when circumstances dictate, we have to look at all options available. But I believe it's important going forward that we operate on a consensus basis, especially on the controversial issues of the day. But on immigration in particular, we can't trust this president on immigration reform. He's already proven untrustworthy because he tried to circumvent the legislative process with his executive orders. I think if we can get consensus on border security and interior enforcement, fine. But on these other issues, this president has proven himself untrustworthy.
In saying that you would accept the speakership, Mr. Speaker, you said that you wouldn't take the job if it interferes with your family time, which has opened up a national conversation about the importance of spending time with your family. And there are many people in this country who would like to see you make your first priority legislation that gives people the backing of the federal government so that they can have time with their families. Would you make that one of your first priorities?
So I don't think people ask me to be Speaker so that I can take more money from hardworking taxpayers to create some new federal entitlement. But I think people want to have members of Congress that represent them, that are like them. Don't you want your member of Congress to be a citizen legislator who lives with you, among you, who has your own kinds of concerns, who wants to spend time with his children on Saturdays and Sundays? I'm going to keep living in Janesville, Wisconsin, where I'm from, where I raised my family. I'm going to keep going back and forth to D.C. And yes, Sundays are going to be family days, and Saturdays are family and constituent days. That, I think, is what most people want in their life, is a balance. So if you're asking me, because I want to continue being the best dad and husband and speaker I can be, getting that work-life balance correct means I should sign up for some new unfunded entitlement. That doesn't make any sense to me.
One final question. Much of the Republican base hates the people in power. One of the reasons why you were so popular with the base was because you eschewed power. You're now the guy in charge. How do you avoid becoming one of the haters?
That's a good question. Yeah, this is not a job I was ever seeking and looking for. And I believe in what we call around here regular order. I think the committee should write the bills. I think members of Congress should have the freedom and an open process to represent their constituents in passing legislation. And that's why I don't think leadership should be trying to, covet power and write legislation. I think I want to have a more participatory process, which is really what the founders envisioned a House to look like. And that is something that so many of us, myself included, have been concerned about the way this place has been run. This is why it's a new day. We're wiping the slate clean, and I'm going to do this speakership differently than it's been done in a long time.
Do you expect a long honeymoon or a short honeymoon?
About 35 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Up next, Carly Fiorina faces the critics after this week's debate. We'll talk to her about her performance, the fact checkers, and those comments made by the ladies at The View.
I was recruited to HP to save a company. It was a company that had grown into a bloated, inept bureaucracy that cost too much and delivered too little to customers and shareholders.
Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina at this week's GOP debate defending her record as Hewlett-Packard CEO. She joins us now this morning from Des Moines. Ms. Fiorina, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Good to see you. Again, sorry, no extra hours sleep today.
Good morning, John. It's fine. Daylight, we fell back, so I did get an extra hour's sleep.
That's good. Listen, we talked to Lindsey Graham about this. I wanted to get you to weigh in on the president sending 50 Special Forces operators into Syria. You've talked a lot about what you would do as president when it comes to fighting ISIS. What do you think of the president's plan to send in these 50 operators?
Well, first of all, it's a recognition that you cannot have a successful bombing campaign without people on the ground telling you where to place the bomb. So he's sort of come to reality. On the other hand, it's also too little too late. And I think this is a reflection of the reality that when America does not act, when we do not lead, as we have not in the last 3 years under this president, our options become very constrained and the situation becomes more dangerous. I'm glad he did this, but we still do not have a strategy in Syria. We do not have a strategy to deal with ISIS. I've laid mine out. And so as a result, the situation is far more complicated than it was 3 years ago when he started talking big about Bashar al-Assad must go and red lines cannot be crossed. And now we have Russia and Iran in the middle of Syria calling the shots. When we do not lead, the world becomes a much more dangerous and tragic place, and we are seeing that in Syria.
Russia is bombing the same rebels that we'll be training and advising. If U.S. troops get caught up in a Russian bombing attack, what should the president do?
Well, you know, the president has said that he doesn't believe in no-fly zones, for example, and of course no-fly zones are very effective. They have been effective in the past, and we need to establish one, and we need to make it crystal clear to Vladimir Putin that our jets will fly when and where they want, that our troops cannot be threatened in any way by Russia. But so far, this president has done none of that, although he and his Secretary of State continue to talk to Russia, which is inexplicable to me, because it's pretty clear that the Russians, while they're talking to us, are also lying to us. We need to act now in a way that sends an unmistakable message. And it is why, as President of the United States, in addition to having a strategy in Syria and for ISIS, I would also be rebuilding the 6th Fleet right under Vladimir Putin's nose, rebuilding the missile defense program in Poland, because he must see strength and resolve from the United States of America, and he has not.
Let's go back to the debate on Wednesday. In your opening statement, you joked that in the Reagan Library debate, you were criticized that you didn't smile enough. And the ladies of The View the next day decided that they were going to take issue with that. Let's listen to what Michelle Collins said about your performance at the debate.
She kicked off her thing saying, you know, people tell me that I didn't smile enough during the last debates. She looked demented. I mean, she did not, her mouth did not downturn one time. She was like,
Halloween mask. I love that.
A smiling Fiorina. Can you imagine? Give you nightmares.
Demented, a Halloween mask. Is there a double standard here, Ms. Fiorina, for Republican women? I can't imagine that they would say things like that about Hillary Clinton.
Oh, you think? Yeah, I think there's a double standard. It's funny, you know, I was on The View several months ago. They said none of that to my face. There is nothing more threatening to the liberal media in general and to Hillary Clinton in particular than a conservative woman. So, of course, there's a double standard. And conservative women, from Sarah Palin to Michelle Bachmann to Carly Fiorina, are long used to this. It will not stop me. It will not scare me. And maybe the ladies of The View, if I come back on again, let's see if they have the guts to say that to my face.
You know, they said something similar about Miss Colorado after the Miss America pageant when she appeared on stage in a nurse's uniform. I had a chance to meet Kelly Johnson last weekend in Denver. She's a lovely woman, committed to her profession. Are these women out of touch?
Well, I think what these women represent is a set of liberal feminists who believe that if you do not agree with them on their liberal orthodoxy, that you don't count, that somehow you're not a woman. You see, I know that women represent half the nation, so of course our views are going to be as diverse as men's. I also know that unless and until women's potential is fully unlocked in this country, and women have been crushed under the Obama economy, that we will not be as good a nation as we can be. And frankly, I am tired of being in insulted by liberal feminists who talk about women's issues when the reality is every issue is a woman's issue, from the economy to ISIS to Russia to healthcare to education to the national debt. Women care about all of that. So I am really sorry that I don't agree with the women of The View. Nevertheless, I'm going to continue to stand up, stand strong, talk about what I believe in, and I am Hillary Clinton's worst nightmare as a result.
On the subject of women and their plight under the Obama administration, one of your most talked about moments from Wednesday's debate is when you said this. Let's listen.
92% of the jobs lost during Barack Obama's first term belonged to women.
Well, what women are talking about, Ms. Fiorina, in relation to that statement is that the data that you use does not represent the totality of the Obama administration's first term. People from your campaign said to me yesterday you misspoke during the debate. Do you want to take a moment to clarify those remarks?
Well, you know, this is what the liberal media do. They try to discredit the messenger when the message is true. Yes, it is true. The 92% figure refers to the first 3.5 years of Barack Obama's term, not the first 4 years. Here's what's undeniable. Women have been hurt under this administration's policies. The extreme poverty rate among women is the highest ever recorded. The poverty rate among women, 16.1%, is the highest in 20 years. Women have been harmed by this administration's policies, just as African Americans have, just as the poor have been. Progressive policies are bad for the people that they claim to help. That is true of women as well as men.
Well, let me just ask you again, if you're using a data set that stops in March of 2012 that you use because that is the most advantageous point, to make that point, are you doing voters a disservice by not telling them what really happened during the entire first term of the presidency, which is that by January of 2013, the number of jobs among women had actually increased by about 400,000?
Yes, as my campaign said, we misspoke. But that reality doesn't change the reality that women have been harmed under this administration. Think about what I just said, John, and this is what the liberal media tries to do. Let us discredit the messenger so that we ignore the truth of the message. Here is the truth of the message. Women are harmed by this administration's policies. Record numbers of women have lost jobs, are living in poverty, or are living in extreme poverty. That is the debate we're going to have to win in 2016. What is the real human impact of progressive policies? And the reality is the human impact of progressive policies is to keep people unemployed. We have record numbers of people who are no longer working or who have quit looking for work. We have record numbers of people on food stamps. Yeah. We have record numbers of people living in poverty. Those are the facts. That is the truth.
All right. We've got to wrap it up there. Ms. Fiorina, thanks so much for joining us again. Good to see you. We'll see you down the campaign trail, I'm sure.
See you, John. Thank you.